Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to anotr episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Neighbor constantly complains about my noise waking up her baby. I've had enough. After that, the nice guy who lied to his date about who he was and really ended up paying for it. And after that, am I the jerk for giving a very silly, ugly face in meetings after my boss said I should smile more? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to watch the new Doctor Strange movie. I don't get to watch the new Marvel movie? Oh no, poor me. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Neighbor constantly complains about my noise waking up her baby. I've had enough. My garage is about 3 meters away from my neighbor's bedroom where their baby sleeps. I've got a roller door which beeps quietly 4 times within 20 seconds of me arriving home and pushing the button. It's so quiet that at times I can't hear it when sitting in the room adjacent to the garage when my partner comes home. Since my neighbor had her baby, I've made an effort to be more considerate of noise. Despite already soundproofing my rumpus room, I've stopped playing my drums after 6 p.m. I've also declined hosting friends outside in my backyard due to noise. I think I've been more than considerate, but apparently not. I get home from work at 11 p.m. and put my car in the garage. A couple weeks ago, my neighbor approached me and asked if I could wait until the morning to put my car away, but I declined as there have been break-ins to cars on our street lately. My car is also one that is targeted by thieves a lot as parts are expensive, and it's an enthusiast car. I apologized, but I was firm when telling her that I will not, under any circumstances, leave my car out overnight. I also know that they sleep with their window open that faces my garage, but I thought it would be weird to bring it up and suggest they close the window. I'm also confused as I have an aftermarket exhaust on the car which is louder than the original, but they've said nothing about that. A couple nights ago, I came home to her husband's car blocking my driveway, just enough that I couldn't get my car through. It was kind of useless because I pushed the button before I even reached my driveway, so it beeped anyway. They didn't come out, so I had their car towed, and they haven't done it since. Today, Saturday, I decided to play my drums around lunchtime in my soundproofed rumpus room. You can only hear minimal vibration from the kick from the outside, but it's at the rear of my property and quite far from any neighbors, but they still had something to say. The wife came over and basically said she had put up with my noise for long enough and that she was exhausted due to the kid never sleeping thanks to the noise I make. I was definitely still upset about the driveway blocking situation from the other night, and I snapped a little, telling her that I'd been considerate enough and already made concessions in terms of noise. I said that while it's within my rights to play music up until 10 p.m. in our council, I've cut myself off at 6 p.m. in consideration of her and her kid. I said that from now on, she'll have to get over it because I was done catering to her and her family. Not the jerk. It sounds like you've been very reasonable and you're allowed to live your life. They chose to have the baby. Surely they knew things might wake it up. And you're not supposed to keep things completely silent for the baby sleeping. They need to get used to a normal level of noise while sleeping. Obviously, don't vacuum the room they're in, but a neighbor's garage door is something they should be able to sleep through. Not the jerk. Not that it's a good excuse, but she's probably exhausted, and this is one of those need something to blame kind of things. She's probably fixated on you and your noise because it's something that's right next door and something she can directly attack in a manner of speaking. It sounds as if she's unlucky enough to have one of those babies that just doesn't sleep much or well. That's not your fault though. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or their neighbor? Please let us know. To be honest, I can't stand noise of any sort. That's why Reddit Boy and I live off-grid now. Highly recommended. The nice guy who lied to his date about who he was and really ended up paying for it. Long ago, I was waiting tables and I had a two-top. They looked to be on a date. Both were dressed up. She ordered a salad and he ordered a burger. She cocked her head to the side when he said that and she said, "I thought you were vegan." He laughed it off, said he was, but that sometimes he splurged. She didn't look happy about that, but said nothing. All I could think of was, awkward. He ordered a Guinness halfway through his meal, and she raised an eyebrow at that too. Wait a second, you said that you didn't drink either. He laughed it off again, saying he meant harder drinks. Certainly, beer wasn't an issue. I snuck away, but listened to them argue behind a server station. Her. I specifically wrote on my profile that I was a vegan and I didn't drink. Him, waving his hand at her. One beer isn't an issue. Plus, I haven't had meat in ages, at least a few weeks. just because you don't doesn't mean your man can't. Her, I was looking for like-minded men, someone who also doesn't eat meat or drink. He cut her off. You know, I saw that on your profile, but I figured once you met me, you'd be open to it. Once you get to know me, I'm a great guy. You should give me a chance, despite our small differences. Her, so far, 2 important facts you told me about yourself were lies. I got busy and had to go do something. Dang it. When I looked back, the woman was gone. She had pretended to go to the bathroom, found another server, gave him money, and told him to give it to me. Then she fled the restaurant. Her date waited a bit, and then he started looking toward the bathroom to see where she was. I brought the check and had updated it to show the payment she had made. Him, after looking at the bill. She paid for her food? Where'd she go? Me. I think she may have left, sir. He gets angry. What? I shrugged. He got up, went to the bathroom door and knocked on it, calling her name. When nobody came out, he pushed the door open. I was about to tell him to get out of the restroom, but he saw it was empty and returned to the table. Digging for his wallet, he loudly complained about his date ditching him. He started telling the tables around him that his date had been a horrible person and had taken off. He used really mean words. I was shocked and they all looked uncomfortable. When I picked up his credit card to run it, he yelled at me, Her loss. I make great money and have a big house. I have a boat. Her loss. I dropped his receipt while internally rolling my eyes at him. He had lied to her about who he was, and it was her loss? Yeah, okay. Up until then, I had never encountered an r/nice guy before. What a tool. Edit. He did not tip me, but she left me $10. Am I the jerk for giving a very silly, ugly smile in meetings after my boss said I should smile more? I work in a tech consulting job. I'm the only woman on the team, and my boss told me I was coming off harsh with clients and should be more upbeat and smile more. It felt, ugh. I right away texted my group chat of coworkers without the management in it, asking, has boss man ever told any of you guys to smile more? It was an immediate round of no's, and a couple of my coworkers asked if he said that to me and pointed out the double standard. A few of my coworkers joked that some of the clients we have right now don't give them anything to smile about. So then I asked if any of them had ever been called harsh, and it was again all no's. I told them that boss had told me to smile more, and one of my coworkers sent me a picture of someone pulling a silly face with a weird pinched smile and bug-out eyes saying, well, what boss man says, he gets. I thought that was hilarious and decided to actually do it. Anyway, I started smiling more and more around my boss, but also a bit stupidly, just keeping my mouth pinched tensely, gums on display, and purposely pulling my chin backwards towards my neck so I'd have a double chin. I never did it in front of actual clients, just my boss and coworkers who were in on the joke, and my boss kept looking uncomfortable when I did. He asked me at a meeting about a week in what the face I was pulling was. I said, what face? He said, that one, just a second ago. And my coworker said, wait, she was just smiling. What are you getting at her for? My boss said, it looked like she was making a face. And my other coworker pulled out his phone where he had some pictures from a recent happy hour where I was making that face to make my coworkers laugh. And he said, dude, what's wrong with you? That's literally her smile. Look at this picture from last Friday. And all of my coworkers backed him up, saying that was just how I smile. My boss was looking kind of incredulous, so I clarified that if something makes me spontaneously laugh or grin, it probably looks a little more relaxed. But when I'm just putting on a smile to be polite or pose for a picture, I guess that's how I smile. And I was trying to be polite after he let me know I was coming off harsh in meetings. Anyway, at my next one-on-one meeting, my boss said I didn't need to change my demeanor that much based on his comments, because honestly, it was coming off disingenuous, and that would look worse in front of clients. I just said, yeah, I guess I've never really been good at being super peppy without it looking fake. And as far as I know, that was the end of it. Except for it becoming a running joke at the office that I look like Nigel Thornberry, which is a pretty smashing nickname, honestly. But I feel a little bad that I basically gaslit my boss and my coworkers were in on it instead of being direct with them. Am I the jerk for my fake smile thing? You sound hilarious, and your coworkers sound like the most incredible people on this planet. Not the jerk, and thanks for bringing a smile to my own grouchy face. Not the jerk. He messed around and found out. Very glad your crew had your back. You all did the boss and the company a huge favor in settling this quietly amongst yourselves. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Boss man and the corporation would have lost, but you and your team would have also lost time, energy, and life joy. You're the jerk. You don't mention that he has a pattern of singling you out for things or negative interactions, so it sounds like this is an isolated incident. Have you ever thought that maybe this was legitimate feedback from your boss and that you are unconsciously wearing facial expressions or acting in a way that makes clients uncomfortable? That maybe a client has said something to him? It doesn't matter if he's given that feedback to anyone else, because they may not have that issue. You then brought everyone else into it, coalition building, influencing how coworkers see him and potentially creating an HR situation for him, and because you were offended by what could have been a sincere suggestion. And even if you asked your coworkers if you should smile more, of course they most likely would say no, because they don't want to offend you. You then proceeded to mock him with that fake smile. You blew this totally out of proportion and potentially damaged your relationship with your boss because you have a chip on your shoulder and you're looking for things to be offended about. If you knew how hard it can be to have conversations with your subordinates on how they interact with customers, you would give him the benefit of the doubt. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her boss? Please let us know. Smiling is overrated. I haven't smiled since 1996. Jerk gets his car crushed. This story happened about 15 years ago. Cast. We've got me, female, 5'11". We've got Bob, friend, store manager. We've got Chief, my boss. We've got entitled jerk, the one who lost his car. Okay, background. I worked as a firefighter as an investigator for an independent department. I was the rank of lieutenant and was based out of a large station. 2 engines, 1 newer 110 tower ladder truck, relative later, 1 chief car, and 1 utility truck. Every day, the food duties changed from firefighter to firefighter. My chief's turn to cook when this happened. My friend Bob worked as a GM of a small grocery store. There was a long, empty space in front of the store marked with the following sign: emergency vehicles only. Enter entitled jerk. He had a nice-looking BMW and always parked in the above spot every week. Bob told entitled jerk that he couldn't park there. I can park wherever I want. I make more money in a day than you make in a week. My friend calls me complaining about entitled jerk. I agree to go and watch the spot. I get into our utility truck, which had the department decals on the door and a single red light on the dash. I park in the emergency vehicles only spot. As I'm walking in, I hear, "You can't park there. That's my special spot." I turn and look at entitled jerk. "Excuse me?" I ask. "I'm on official duties and can park there." I pointed to the decal on the door. Entitled jerk looks and says, "You ain't no firefighter. Move your truck and leave now." Now, I'm proud of my job. In a department of 2,000, I was 1 out of the 5 women on the department. I graduated top in my class. I have a shocked-looking expression on my face. I get really upset. I walk into my friend's office to get more information about his problem with entitled jerk. As Bob explains the continuous parking violations, and I see a small notice on the fire suppression system, sprinklers, that said the inspection was coming up. I smile as I get an idea. Cue the revenge. I get some information, leave Bob's office, and get into the truck heading back to the station. I arrive and I head into my chief's office. I tell him about entitled jerk and what he said and does. Chief is 6'6", he's 320 pounds, and he's Samoan. He sees everyone as family. Chief's face gets bright red. I explained my idea and he gets very happy. He rushes out and calls a station meeting. I lay out my idea. We send out the station to do a fire drill and inspection by sending the old truck and 1 engine to the store. My friend will call the station the next time entitled jerk parks in the fire lane. Skip to 2 weeks later. Bob calls the station stating that entitled jerk had just parked. As I'm thanking him, I hear his fire alarm go off. I rush and change into my investigator uniform with turnout gear. Tell Chief and send the trucks out. I ride in the Quint. We arrive and I see entitled jerk's car right in the emergency vehicle spot. I radio to have 1 engine to pull right in front of entitled jerk's car and the truck to pull right beside the driver's side door. I get out and the engineer starts setting up the ladder, which means 4 very large and heavy support struts go down and 1 crushes the front of his hood. His alarm goes off. The lineman breaks his windows as he runs the large 5-inch draft line from the pump to the standpipes, the fire access to the sprinkler system, through his front seats. I go in to find Bob hurriedly getting people out as the alarm is going off. Entitled jerk runs out of the store, sees his car, and goes ballistic. I radio the PD dispatch and request a few officers to the store, as I had a male impeding a fire operation. The dispatcher says they will send a few officers. 3 officers show up, and I ask them to follow me. They do when I call out, "Hey, leave my firefighters alone." Entitled jerk turns and sees me. He rushes up screaming that I'll pay for damaging his precious baby, his car. I stop him and tell him that if he didn't leave, that he would be arrested. He gets in my face. "You did this. I'll have your job for this." He then turns, pushing me back. The officers and I rush and tackle Entitled Jerk to the ground. After they cuff him, I calmly inform Entitled Jerk that he was under arrest for assault and interference with a fire investigation, and that his car would be towed for parking in a fire lane. I later found out that it was crushed. Entitled Jerk got 12 months probation for pushing me and interfering with a fire operation. He also got a fine of $500 for parking, the cost of the tow, and he lost his nice BMW. Moral of the story: don't park where you shouldn't, or bad things will happen. Hearing aids are not earbuds. This happened a few years ago, around the time I was 17. I had just started working at a small cafe run by a well-known family in our area. I knew some people who had worked there before, and they told me for the most part the owners were great, very chill and laid back when it was slow, and normally weren't bad about breathing down the employees' necks. Their oldest daughter, who also helped run everything, was the one who was very peculiar, and we'll call her Karen. I'm officially diagnosed with a hearing deficiency. Not bad enough to be considered deaf, but more than hard of hearing, so I wear hearing aids. My first day before we opened, my coworkers asked me if they could do anything else to help me out, and we eventually started talking about the hearing aids in general. While talking about everything, I mentioned they had Bluetooth capabilities, so I could play music through them. Not that I would, but I could. Karen had been in the room at the time and said, "You can't wear those. No earbud policy," and tapped on the policies paper on the wall. I protested, explaining that they're hearing aids and not earbuds, and that I wouldn't be using them to listen to any music while I was working. Her reasoning was I didn't need them because I wasn't considered fully deaf, and I was doing this to get around the no earbud policy, directly quoting when I said they could play music. "I can't wear them? Okay, let's see how this goes." I placed them into the case in my bag and started my shift. I couldn't understand my trainer, couldn't hear the customers, couldn't hear when orders were called to be sent out. Things were going extremely slow. A couple of warm pastries burnt since I wasn't able to hear the timers. Simple sentences had to be repeated multiple times, with people basically yelling at me just for me to be able to piece a few words together. I guess the cherry on top was me ignoring one of the owners when she tried speaking to me. Karen came up to me and tried addressing me about it until she finally realized what was going on after she had repeated herself 5 times. By the end of that shift, I was allowed to wear my hearing aids, no questions asked. Am I the jerk for cutting his allowance and canceling my stepson's trip? I, 35 female, am married to Jane, 37 female, and she has a son from another marriage, Connor, who's 14. They moved in with me, and Connor spends weekends with his dad. Jane decided to take a 1-year sabbatical after an exhausting year. She was a hospital nurse, and maybe start again at another job after that period. We agreed that I would shoulder the expenses as it wouldn't be a financial burden on me, so I took over the things Jane paid for, like school, household expenses, and giving Connor an allowance. Connor and I don't have the best relationship, even though I've known him since he was 7. He still has the idea in his head that I was the reason for his parents' separation. He put the coin that I wasn't his mother, and that's why I didn't have to educate him, but he started to respect me more after I became the only income in the house. So, I got home from work and Connor was sitting in the living room with his friends playing games. When he saw me, he came and said, "Give me $50 to go out with my friends." Didn't ask, just demanded. When I started asking what this money was for, he started saying I wasn't his mother, so I told him to at least be polite and ask. He asked this time and I gave. I hadn't even gone that far when I heard him say to his friends, "It's a pain in the butt to depend on that jerk for that." I came back, demanded the money back, and said we would talk later. I talked to Jane about what happened, and she gave me the go-ahead to decide what I would do. We both sat him down, and I said that I would no longer pay him an allowance to go out with his friends. I would continue to pay for his lunch at school. And because of the disrespect he did, I would not pay for the trip he would take with the class that I hadn't paid for yet. He even tried to play the fact that I'm not his mother, but Jane stayed by my side. After all, it wasn't the first time he had mistreated me, and if he really wanted to go, ask his father. He left angry, calling me various things, and ended up telling his father, who started going off on me for doing this to him. He can't afford the trip. Lots of other things not worth mentioning. Connor isn't talking to me. I'm not cutting back on what I promised my wife. I'm cutting back on the treats she gave, and I didn't care to pay until I wasn't respected. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. As you say, his father can pony up the money for him. He doesn't deserve any extras when he treats you this poorly. I'm glad Jane is on your side in this. He needs to learn some respect, but I don't expect this to happen. I would wonder if his father contributes to his poor attitude towards you and your wife. Am I the jerk for getting mad that I wasn't invited to my ex-wife's wedding? My ex-wife and I were together for 7 years, and we have 2 daughters together, ages 5 and 3. Shortly after the birth of our 3-year-old, we broke up in kind of a civil manner. A few months after our breakup, she met her current fiancé and they started dating. Once our divorce was finalized a year after that, they got engaged. Overall, due to the fact that I'm the father of the 2 kids that I have with her, and I've been in her family for 7 years, I have a pretty great relationship with her family, and I still get invited to family gatherings. I can tell my ex is not too happy about it, but she sucks it up for the sake of the kids and her family. Now they're planning their wedding for some time, and they just gave out invites. I wasn't included. Our daughters were, but I wasn't. I contacted her family, mainly her sisters and her mom, and I expressed how upset I am that I'm excluded from the wedding, and I'm even more upset that they didn't do something about it. They say that it's not up to them, and it's the couple's decision, and they wish they had me there, but they don't want to upset my wife by going against her wishes. Later, my ex called me and lost it on me for calling her family to complain, and asked me why I feel entitled to an invite to her wedding. I told her that I still feel like part of the family, and it's weird that I'm invited to all these family gatherings, but excluded from this one, and I think we can be civil and supportive towards each other. I also feel like it will be a good thing for our kids to see us being so supportive, and me being in the wedding sends a good message. We are still co-parenting after all, and we have a decent kind of relationship despite our breakup, and I don't see a reason to be excluded since I'm still a big part of her life since we share 2 kids. She said I'm very entitled for this and that it's ridiculous how I got mad, and that I, as an ex, was not invited to the wedding and that she doesn't owe me that. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. You say yourself that your ex-wife isn't happy you're included in her family gatherings. Of course you're not invited to her wedding. You're being weird calling her family and complaining about it. Honestly, when you and your partner break up, you lose generally their family as well. Suck it up, Buttercup. You're the jerk. You're the jerk. Straight facts, you aren't part of the family and are owed no invite. Your daughters are also her daughters, so naturally they get to take part. Perhaps it's time to reflect on the fact that your ex-wife has moved on, and perhaps you should too. Are you still going to spend time with her family when you meet a partner of your own? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his ex-wife? Please let us know. Bruh. I let a restaurant fail on a busy night, and it kickstarted my career. This was when I was 18. I'm 34 now. So 2004 to 2005. Think pre-iPhone, but cell phones like the Nokia 3310 exist, which I had one because my parents wanted to make sure I always could be contacted. I worked at a bar chain restaurant for 6 months. Let's call it C. It was a completely new store. When we opened, we were the only building for 8 blocks, except for the sister restaurant next door that was part of the same investment group as C. It was a decent upper-middle-class white neighborhood, so we'd get lots of people in the door. I was originally hired as to-go, but I was trained up in almost everything in the restaurant, and I frequently filled shifts, and I got most hours for it. It was the worst job I ever had, and still is. After getting shifted around to different homes, to-go, QA, host, sometimes server, I eventually ended up in bus, cleaning tables. They promised they would move me off of bus once we had bussers, but as we'll find out later, that day never came. The main reason this happened is that we ran out of bussers. They tried hiring bussers at a rapid rate, but it didn't work. The average survival rate for a busser was 2 weeks, including training time. Eventually, our reputation of chewing out bussers made its rounds. No one would even show up for interviews for the job. See, At C, a pecking order had been established. At the top, you had the managers, then it was the servers, then it was the bar servers, restaurant servers, etc. Guess who was at the bottom? That's right, bussers. Anytime I spoke up about how people needed to pre-bus their tables, people scoffed and said I should just do my job. I explained how I could clear an entire restaurant by myself if everyone pre-bussed their tables, 30 seconds per table versus 8 minutes per table. Deaf ears. So I have to explain why there's a huge time differential between a pre-bus table and a total bus table. If the servers took every plate off the table, even if the table was grody, I could wipe it into my bucket, clean up a few things, wipe off the seat, reset the center of the table, and move on to the next table. I'd be in and out in about 30 seconds and on to the next table. However, if I had to totally bus a table, I'd have to take all of the plates and organize everything on the tab. Time varied depending on the number of people at the table, 2 minutes for a 2-top, 4 to 5 minutes for a 4-top, etc. If a table had ordered lots of drinks, multiple fajitas, each fajita meal contained less than 6 dishes, and or had been particularly unsanitary about their eating practices, unruly kids usually, you could add up to 3 minutes per table. This also compounds that I had to go back to the kitchen and sort through all of the plates, cups, etc. Well, 2 months into my "we're going to move you off of busing once we find bussers," it's a busy Saturday night. I'm talking 1 hour wait at 6:30 p.m. Half the tables are currently dirty and I'm working my butt off, but each table takes about 5 minutes because no one is pre-busing tables. I'm told the priority is the restaurant, so I had to tell the bar waiters that they probably wouldn't be bussed at all because it would be so busy. They were not having that, and the on-shift assistant manager told me that I should do my job, but I should still prioritize the restaurant, not the bar. Whatever. I'm constantly telling servers to pre-bus their tables, only to be ignored. It was a particularly bad night, so I asked if the dishwashers could help me out when I brought back my tabs instead of organizing everything myself. They were nice, so they agreed, and it was a decent system, cut out 2 to 3 minutes per table. It was still pretty hectic, with lots of people wanting food. It still didn't help that I had to go back to the kitchen every time there was a full bus table. Enter Karen, queen of the bar server jerks. Remember that pecking order I mentioned? Yeah, she was the queen of the server order. She was one of the ones that constantly berated me for my job performance, despite the fact that I did more than almost anyone else in the restaurant. She made my last 2 months a living heck, constantly telling me that I didn't do a good job, that she had to wait for me for too long, etc. I constantly told the assistant managers and manager about the disrespect I received, and they said I should just man up. She never got a single write-up. One particularly busy Saturday night, Karen was a server in the bar side, which meant she wasn't in the priority. I told her that I couldn't bus her tables unless she pre-bussed them, and only if there weren't restaurant tables I needed to bus. She was constantly telling me I needed to bus her tables and I was lazy, despite the fact that I had lifted over 300 tabs that night. She wasn't the priority. She didn't pre-bus any of her tables, and she was always on the back dock smoking. Once that night, a nice couple saw me working in the table behind them and politely asked if they could talk to their server so they could take their order. They had left them alone for 15 minutes while she was smoking on the back dock and flirting with one of the prep cooks. She scoffed when I interrupted her flirting. "Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. I'm sorry I interrupted your 6th flirting break today so that you can do the thing you were hired to do." About 6:30 p.m. that night, the restaurant got flooded with people. 1 hour waits, and I had to push it to the limit. I was flipping tables, despite absolutely zero of the servers pre-bussing. However, since the restaurant was the priority, I couldn't get to her tables at all. Finally, we got a dip. I could finally get to her 3 tables, and all of them aren't pre-bussed. So I have to do the full bussing for her tables, despite they have been vacant for almost 45 minutes. After the first table, she follows me back to the second table and tells me I need to hurry and I'm garbage at my job and I'm making her lose money. I tell her to leave me alone and don't reprimand me in the front of the house. It was embarrassing, with bar patrons looking over their shoulder, and I could see they honestly felt sorry for me. I was at the lowest point in my life at this time. I honestly felt like I was the worst human being in the world. Once she left, I stopped bussing for a second and sat down at a table for a second. I looked at the dirty half-full tab and I got up. The table wasn't finished and I left my dirty tab on the seat. I went to the back and to go. It wasn't active, and this was before widespread internet. We got maybe 15 orders per night, so the managers had relegated to-go duties to the QA that serviced the rest of the restaurant. It was easily accessible for them, but it was also vacant at that point in time. Call-in to-go was a relatively new and novel concept. I put down my headset, turned it off, pulled out a to-go pad, and wrote a full note, noting how this restaurant is going to go down the toilet unless the managers get courage and reprimand the staff for treating bussers like crap. I then left without telling anyone. I was called on my cell phone about 5 minutes into my drive home, and the assistant manager told me, "OP, you still have a shift." My response was, "No, I don't. I quit." Their response, "OP, you still have a shift." Again, my response is, "No, I don't need to be disrespected like I have. I quit." She had the gall to repeat herself, "OP, you still have a shift." I hung up and turned off my phone. It turned out that I left just in time for the dinner rush. Saturdays, we closed at midnight, so for those last 4 hours, it was heck in a handbasket. I was told that the assistant manager prevented anyone from going home until 2 a.m. because the restaurant was basically a trash basket by the end. Wait times at 10 p.m. were capped because they were well over 2 hours. Host told me later on that she had to turn away 40 families that night because everything went to heck. Some people just left while waiting for a table. Others were getting misplaced. This information made it up to corporate, and they had to call in a fixer team to figure out what happened. They wanted to call me, but I wasn't going to talk to them. There was some restructuring in the business. The manager got shifted to another position in the company. The assistant manager that called on staff was let go. Karen rode up, relegated to the crappy shifts, and eventually left. I didn't return for 2 months, but not as an employee, but a customer. I was told all this by one of the remaining assistant managers, the one that actually treated me like a human being, and he gave me all of my tip shares, which was nice. The next best part of this, the day after I left C, my best friend found an ad that a huge game maker was looking for QAs. We applied that day, and the following week I got interviewed and hired on the spot. He didn't make it. It was the beginning of my programming career. I advanced through that job, got over to automation programming, then got hired on at other companies. Now I'm a senior programmer for a sheriff's office with 14 years of programming experience. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.